The Environmental Protection Agency recently released a report on the use of neonicotinoid seed treatments in soybeans and concluded they provide negligible overall benefits in most situations. The EPA's data review showed there was no difference in soybean yield when seed was treated or not treated with neonicotinoids. Earlier this week, we talked with UNL Extension entomologist Tom Hunt to discuss this report, what it could mean for future production, and the purpose of these types of seed treatments.
Neonicotinoids are a class of insecticides that act similarly on the same receptor site, a nicotine receptor site within the insect. And so there's a class of these insecticides that can be applied on the seed prior to planting that are systemic, so they're taken up by the plant, and so they have a toxic effect on insects for about 3 weeks or so on those seedling young bean plants.
And you use them for what purpose?
In Nebraska, the primary target are bean leaf beetles. In some areas of the country, they have some other insects like plant hoppers and cutworms and things, but in Nebraska, it's primarily bean leaf beetle.
The EPA has released a study that reviews their use. What did the EPA conclude?
Well, the EPA did a study that was a very broad brush type study that looked at the benefits of neonicotinoid seed treatments as applied to control insects, and they found that there wasn't a benefit really to the farmer in a broad brush across the U.S. Now, you know and I know that agriculture is local, pest management is local, even to the field. So there are benefits to neonicotinoids on soybeans. It's just that they found that they were overused. And for the most part, I would agree to that, although I don't want to discount the times that they are useful.
Why is this review important? What could they do to their use in the future?
Well, they weren't explicit why they did the study, but I imagine it's because of the effect of neonicotinoids on bees and pollinators that we've been hearing of, and the fact that they're so broadly used. They're used on almost all corn acres, and across the U.S., about 30% of the bean acres, but local areas up to 80%. So that's what drove this study, I believe. And, you know, we don't know what the effects or what the ramifications of it are, but it could be restricted use or could be regulation of these products on some crops.
Specifically for Nebraska, you've touched on this, but how widespread is their use and what are they using them for?
Neonicotinoid seed treatments are used for either soil insects early in the season or early season pests of a variety of plants. They're placed on corn, they're placed on soybeans, and a variety of other plants on the seeds. And so typically it's insects, typically early in the year if we're talking seed treatments.
In Nebraska, do you feel there are situations where neonicotinoid seed treatments in soybeans are overused?
Yes, I believe they are. Most of the bean leaf beetle that we see are on the early planted fields, the fields that are the isolated field that comes up very early and there's no other fields around. The bean leaf beetles can roll into those fields and cause significant damage. Also, in some areas along the river, Missouri River and some river valleys, there have been in the past some bean pod mottle virus that are vectored by bean leaf beetles, and this can be useful in managing that particular disease. It's not widespread in Nebraska, but it is there, and it is a problem in some other states, particularly to the east. And then there are some cases where if it's very hilly ground and it's hard to get in there, and you do have bean leaf beetles, it's an advantage to have a seed treatment.
So how would you recommend that farmers in Nebraska use either these seed treatments or something else?
First of all, kind of look at the field history. And if you're in an area that regularly has high bean leaf beetle populations, has had economically damaging bean pod mottle virus, and you plant early, that's a case where you would benefit from a seed treatment like neonicotinoid seed treatments. Typically, the first fields you plant, particularly if they're in April or the first week of May, that may benefit. If it's past the first week of May, particularly middle May or beyond, I don't see a benefit to the seed treatments. They are not effective against really soybean aphid, particularly in Nebraska. They can kind of slow the growth down a little bit, but you still, if you're going to have soybean aphids, they come in July typically where they build up, and that's well past when neonicotinoids are active.
Are there dangers in using them season after season after season?
Yes, and I think that's one of the main things I worry about is resistance. We see resistance to any product that's used on a wide basis repeatedly over time. We saw that with some of the Bt toxins for rootworms. We've seen it with a lot of other OPs and a lot of other insecticides. So this is a very nice chemistry. It works very well, and so I'd like to keep it around, and I'd like to keep it around for the instances we need it on soybeans and other crops. So resistance to insecticides is one of the primary reasons that I'd like to see the more targeted use of neonicotinoid seed treatments.
This issue is currently open for public comment. On the Market Journal website, we'll link to a CropWatch article on the EPA's report and information about how to submit a comment.